And this session is State of Play 2025, Growth, Gaps, and Game Changers. Very happy to have this session here. We have a bunch of other events where we're going on the road, we're doing things like this, but we also have like 3 established California events. The next one is GamesBeat Next, that happens on November 12th and 13th in San Francisco. We have one on December 11th, which is the GamesBeat Hollywood and Games event, same day as the Game Awards. And then we also do a GamesBeat Summit in May, which will now be May 2026. Let me introduce our panelists here. Actually, I'll have them introduce themselves. I'm going to start here with Adam Boyes.
Hello.
Awesome.
All right. Try this. Thank you. Thanks, Dean. Hi, everyone. My name is Adam Boyes. I'm the CEO and founder of Vivrato. We're a new video game consultancy. We've got 10 consultants based all around the world that work with developers, publishers, platforms, investors to try to navigate these changing times. Previous to this, I co-ran Iron Galaxy Studios, which is the biggest US co-dev. And before that, I was at PlayStation where I launched the PS4. And yeah, these are changing times. I'm so glad to be here to talk about the state of the industry. I have the benefit of traveling around the world, meeting with developers and publishers, understanding the state of the industry. So I'm excited to share with our friends here.
All right, I'm Dominic Lobbia from Zynga. I've been with Zynga for a little over 11 years, been in the game industry for well over 25. My role is I'm a vice president of engineering. I manage a lot of the tech strategy, special projects and initiatives, and work closely with our game teams and central teams on how we integrate technology into what we do.
Very cool. Hi, my name is Joost. I am the CEO and co-founder of a company called ALDORA, which is a data company. We work increasingly with non-gaming brands, advertisers, as they try to figure out how to leverage games as a growth engine. I also teach at NYU Stern, and it's been like years. I remember in school reading Dean's books on the Xbox and everything, and so it's always a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Yuliya Arlova. I'm a BD director at Xsolla. I joined Xsolla 1 year ago. I'm in the industry for about 13 years right now. For 10 years, I was with Wargaming, doing business development and partnerships for them. Not only from the game side, but also on the brand side. And I joined Xsolla 1 year ago. Thank you for having me today.
I guess this session's about the state of the industry, and I think maybe ask Joost. Joost, do you want to take this first question of like, how do you think the game industry is going right now?
The mic is on. It's in 3 words or less. It's been amazing to watch. Everybody kind of fall on the back foot. As an entrepreneur, as a data guy, I deal with strategy. The industry is continuing to kind of do well in the sense that people are challenged to do more with less. I think that's a fascinating time. So in just sheer numbers, the industry, according to my data sets, is $239 billion last year. It's up 3-4%, kind of depending on the industry or the segment that you look at. So it's anemic growth, of course, that excites no one. We come off 10 years of 10-20% annual growth. When you look at mobile, it's about half, like $105 billion globally. But the problems are not at service level. I think the issues, and much of what we'll discuss here today, will have more to do about building out not so much great content, but great new ways to distribute and to reach consumers, right? So much of what I've seen over the years has been a shift in business models where in the early 2000s, you'd had a product-based business, you'd sell boxes at retail. I don't know what GameStop is up to anymore, but they're not in the games industry. They're now a crypto fund, apparently. So that model is gone. games as a service with free-to-play became the new thing, but we've reached some kind of singularity or two where most companies make the same thing, and it's kind of boring and unappealing to consumers. And so now you transition into like a third stage of games as media or games as an ecosystem, where things like Fortnite, where you have to really build an ecosystem around it, things like Roblox, where you have to build a relationship with the customer base, and that's where you see growth, right? It's the Robloxes of the world with, was it 118 million daily active users during their last earnings report. That's amazing. Sony is selling PlayStations faster than they can make them. The Switch 2 did really well. So it's kind of depending on where you look that there's growth, but you have to be a little smarter about it, and I think that's a really fascinating time in the industry.
Awesome. Adam, do you want to talk about your deck of cards a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, so when I started this journey to try to capture, like Joost, who loves gathering data, I'm the vibe check guy. So I like talking to people and ask them how they feel about things. I remember when I first joined Iron Galaxy, David Chelsea said to me, we never had to talk about our feelings till Adam got here. So how I started the journey was I started asking executives and leaders in our industry, I said, what's the #1 problem facing the games industry? The first 30 people I asked gave me 30 different answers. So I ended up polling over 300 people in the industry, and I made a list of 127 different unique problems, which I narrowed down to 52, which I have this deck of cards to try to narrow down the problem set. Because I think one of the challenges we face right now is that everyone's facing different challenges, and they've identified the one problem that they think is the sort of the alpha and the omega, and so they're in a room right now trying to solve that singular problem, when to Joost's point, the problems are vast and varied. It's very sort of nuanced. So trying to drive towards solutions instead of us just sort of reading the headlines and just sort of reacting to the problem set, trying to actually build towards solutions. I think, you know, the biggest observation is the era of sort of manufactured boy bands is over. We can't just tell players what they want and where they're going to go. We have to take them on a journey. And I think it's ironic that the biggest game right now on the planet is Grow a Garden in Roblox, because I think what we all have to do as game developers and in this industry is grow our own garden, right? Around the brand, around the players, and take them on a journey. And so we're now in the gardening business, which is a lot different than the gaming business. We're not just sort of building these big aha moments. And so it's been fascinating to talk to people, to look at that list, to prioritize the different issues, and then try to actually build towards solutions, which has been an amazing journey so far.
What got down to the top 3 or 4 problems?
Yeah, I love that you asked that question, because I actually started to sort them out based on what people, I think this is the funding drought is one that people are facing right now, is how few people can find money. The crowded battlefield. Also call out to Battlefield 6, which looks pretty cool. Proud of what the team's doing. Who's your audience? This is a big one, I think, with discoverability. I think the attention economy is different. I think back in the day we were able to sort of, you know, players were more like golden retrievers, and you could just give them little snacks and they follow the track and then they gobble, 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 and now they're more like mosquitoes and moving as swarms. Time is finite. I think Joost also touched on this. Once people are in these closed ecosystems, they're kind of trapped for a long time. So yeah, it's a lot of developers, I think, between the funding, discoverability, finding your audience are really some of the key issues that I keep seeing when I talk to people.
So I had a very eventful trip going to first DevCom and Gamescom in Germany in the last couple of weeks. And I had such a narrow amount of time to go between flights that I made it by about 30 seconds to my connection flight in Munich. But my luggage didn't appear for 5 more days. So that was wonderful.
I don't have that in the deck, though,
yeah,
dude. That's not, I don't know. Lost luggage is not a big concern.
I broke my roller bag while I was running, right, as well. And then I left my phone as I was leaving Germany, or actually I had gone to Saudi Arabia, and then as I was leaving Saudi Arabia for Dubai, I left my phone in the car and never found it again. So this is I went on.
There actually is a car that's the telephone game,
yeah.
that is one of them. Not your phone, though.
I went on a real journey to get some information for you guys, right? And I'm not sure how to interpret it all. But we all know that all the regions of the world aren't the same. Some are going up and some are going down. I kind of wonder from our panel here, any one of you want to jump in and talk about what regions are really interesting to you, and for what reason? Anybody can actually jump for this one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, it's working. So in the beginning, I would say that I may have kind of a little unique situation here because since joining Xsolla, I focus my work on indie game developers. And I find this crowd really fascinating and extremely talented. And those indie game developers, especially in the PC space, I think they are still in a very good position in North America and in Europe, especially when they find their niche, when they find a genre they want to be really good at. They have really good chance to succeed. And for probably Middle East and Southeast Asia, as well as Latin America, it's a very rising market right now for mobile, definitely. Especially for those games that have local payments and using web shops. That's the key, and that's the trend we're seeing actually all over the places.
Yeah, I had a chance to go to South America. I went down to Colombia and met with a bunch of the universities down there because we want to understand how we can bolster and invest more in a lot of the emerging markets. And what we realized that a lot of the schools are teaching for the jobs that they can land. So fintech, for example, in Colombia. So they're teaching the kids C#. They're not teaching them C++. Right? So they're not teaching the core sort of foundation of game development. And so what we're seeing is that engineering adoption is a lot lower in those regions because the focus in the school system. So I think it's sort of, the onus is on us as an industry to go to these regions and invest and promise jobs and internships at the end of the path so we can help to influence the training that they get along the way. Also spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe, and the development the processes are getting further and faster than ever before. I love that now we have ubiquitous access to tools and technology and engines, so we're seeing that adoption faster. And I just see the hunger overseas for development and for innovation is just far outpacing what I see more in North America. And so it's fascinating. I think too many North American studios are still like trying to do it the old-fashioned way and not looking at these different markets to adopt best practices.
I mean, if you can get Mike 4, please. Or you guys should just hear me. So we're doing a lot of work with governments to that point, whether it's Vietnam on the consumer side. There's some barriers to entry there. We're going to open up an entity. We're talking about some of our partners to bring in server services so we can better serve those markets. We opened up in India, I want to say 12 new payment methodologies last year. We've been investing in South America. We've been investing in Southeast Asia. So a lot of these developers that were just mom and pops or 2 or 3 persons got their work from the big publishers, and now they've done work for hire for a bit. And just like Eastern Europe kind of blossomed after a 6 to 8 year period, it's about South America's time. It's going to be Southeast Asia. I mean, I'm playing Last War Survivor from Vietnam, I want to say, is where it was made, and spending tons of money, unfortunately. But so there are a lot of things happening in these, what we would call secondary markets around the world, that I don't know if it's going to be next year or the year after, but in the next 5 to 6 year cycle, they're going to be players, both in terms of users as well as game production.
So do you feel like we're in a correction or consolidation, or like how can we tell? I don't know, Joost, what do you think there?
It's a fun question. So the difference between a correction and consolidation in my mind is that consolidation, of course, is what happens when lots of companies start buying each other. And I think we just saw that, right? So to the point of funding drying up is like there was such high valuations matched with abundant capital that you had all these companies buying Zynga, for instance, like Take-Two, like $13 billion later. That's a huge markup. It's worth it, I'm sure. At the same time, like these numbers are unheard of, right? The period in which that happened was the last 5 to 10 years. And if you start to take a step back, then you notice that there is this sort of contraction and expansion in the market, where after consolidation, you have all these high valuations, you have these large companies with a lot of just excess IP, and they just can't materialize the efficiencies. They're too big, they're too disorganized in some ways, and they start shedding it again, and they start getting smarter, and it pushes them into a period of a distribution innovation, which, to your point, that's really the correction that's going on. When we ask questions about where is the next growth coming from, how do we push into like emerging markets, how do we get into India, what are some of the new distribution methods that we can think about in terms of pricing and marketing, all of those are questions that come from the fact that post-consolidation, like the size doesn't really matter. It's not actually a benefit so much as it is, something that's weighing you down. And so from a say a 10-year cycle, if you look at it from that perspective, all of a sudden, like, these things are very cyclical. Like, this is exactly what we saw in the early 2000s, when you had all these MMOs come up, and then all of a sudden, here's World of Warcraft taking the cake. It follows, of course, with casual games. Mobile games went the same way. And every time you hit this plateauing growth, then everybody has to be a little smart about what they do. So in my mind, this is a correction. Like, we are adjusting our mindset, our strategies, our sort of mental picture of what the industry does and who we're making this stuff for, as opposed to, let's just build it and see if they come.
That's interesting. I think that it's from our perspective on the mobile side, we kind of see it as more of a consolidation, which is kind of interesting. I think that what we're seeing in mobile specifically is a lot of maturity in terms of, and kind of how the platforms are changing, and the fact that if you're creating a new game and you're trying to scale it, the user acquisition costs, being able to understand your users, being able to scale that game is really challenging, and it's very difficult for smaller startups to be able to put the money behind something like that, rather than looking at larger companies and working and consolidating to basically get leverage in the market.
I totally agree that in mobile that's what's taking place, but you have to, of course, then also see that if AppLovin sells off its gaming division, which AppLovin, if there's anything that they do well, it's distribution, right? They see it as like a dead end, and they sold their shop to Triple Dots, purely for the fact that that's not what's going to make them double the size in 5 years. And so currently mobile is going through that consolidation. You're absolutely correct. But at some point, once Dream Games and Playrix kind of plateau in their own right and Discovery becomes a zero-sum effort, what's next? And then it's about the relationship with the customer. Then it's about brand marketing and creating value for your customers, as opposed to just being the biggest one around. The rankings in mobile haven't really moved much over the last couple of years. It's the same 12 companies, and that's great. They deserve the success. And also, it's kind of boring, right? As a player, you're just like, all right, it's the same kind of games over and over again. Like, audiences, they move on from this thing. So the challenge is, of course, combining those two moments.
I guess one of the interesting things is that every now and then a market gets a reset, and thanks to Epic's efforts in the courts, both Apple and Google are starting to open up their ecosystems and are no longer able to charge the 30% taxes or fees that they've been doing so far. And so it's a direct-to-consumer channel that is forming now. And Dominic, I wonder what you think of that opportunity.
I think that it's really exciting. It's really changing how we look at the market. It's an opportunity to really find growth in a new space. There are challenges, obviously, converting users from a one-click purchase option in iOS or on Android to having to go through setting up a card or some payment method and then reusing that. Finding ways to optimize that flow, I think, is something that we're looking at. We really think that, but with the landscape changing and the way it's already changed, we really see that, easily, getting to 20% is kind of like table stakes at this point, if you want to look at like how much you're doing direct payments versus going through an app store. And we really think we can push that much higher.
I have a quick, I think that's a sea change in the industry, particularly mobile. The fact that Apple and Google are forced to kind of let go of this iron grip on the fees and all of the policies that come with platform ecosystems and their policies. That creates this oxygen in the market. Like, it just oxygenates the mobile game space in a way that you now see the Supercells and the Zyngas having the chance to take some of the top, right? And so on an annual basis, you're talking about $4 billion that will now flow back to the major mobile makers. And that's a huge incentive for them to kind of start building out more of a customer relationship.
Yeah, and also just to add to that, like, it's also a great thing for players too, right? Because by being able to pay the lower fees, we can also incentivize players by giving them more for the same amount of money. From our standpoint, it's a win-win situation, right? Player gets more, we get a better margin. It's good for everybody.
Adam, what do you think of the, say, AAA space and where it's going? And is there like a divide between them and just everybody else, I guess?
Well, I think it sort of dovetails back on the comment I made earlier, that like trying to tell people what they're going to like nowadays is harder than ever before. You have to earn them, and then you have to take them on the journey. I think we're still sort of romanticizing the idea of a first-time studio can build, you know, a product that's multi-$100 million and is going to be dramatically successful. So we keep chasing that. I think we're learning that there's sort of riches and niches, right? When we can sort of follow the fun stuff that's happening, whether it's the Peak, right, which is a smaller team that built it, and they're at 6 million units plus. I think there's a bigger trend towards that. Yeah, I think the AAA and quadruple A, I think it's a challenge, right? It's under attack in many ways. I think we still see examples. I think Battlefield 6 I mentioned earlier, I think they're on the right track for sort of how to build a big sort of blockbuster moment. But I think we also see this in television movies, right? We don't have the tentpole monoliths as much as anymore. So I think it's forcing us because players are more fickle. Luckily, I have a research laboratory at home. I have a 14 and a 16-year-old, so I just watch them on TikTok and, you know, watch how they play things, and they have zero loyalty, right? They don't even know what things cost, right? Because we have Game Pass and we have Netflix, and it's just like comes free to them. So I think as an industry, we're also turning a bit of a blind eye to the next generation of players. How they spend, where they're spending. I mean, yeah, it's great that our spend is up year over year. Joost, to your point earlier, I do think, though, that in 10 years from now, when they start to mature and they sort of come out of these ecosystems, what is AAA and quadruple A 2.0? What does that look like in 5 to 10 years? And I just don't see enough of us focused on sort of building those solutions and the pathway to that. So that's something I'm really fascinated about.
This isn't really on our question list, but I wonder what you guys think about like North America ruling the game business or the games industry. You know, is that something that's still an assumption, I guess, or do you think that you know the world has moved beyond us?
You go first.
The answer to the question, if the US or North America rules the global games industry, I think is a no for me. You know, historically, Japan was really one of the biggest ones, of course. The US kind of grew up and came into its own. Europe has always been a distant third, but then all of a sudden there's this other country called China that just kind of ran ahead, and it's starting to prove itself. And I think to some degree we can raise a lot of questions, but undeniably, I think, like the Black Myth Wukong's coming out, it sort of shows them that they can operate on a global scale. And it's true that most players for that title, for instance, will still be Chinese, but they are starting to kind of knock on the door globally in that sense. And so just the sheer size, it pulls away some of the major IPs, of course. When it comes to growth for like the major platforms from the US, they look to the Middle East, they look to areas in Asia. So I think in many ways, while the US will have a considerable role in the future, are they the king of the industry or the royalty of the industry? They might have to share the podium a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm finding the same thing, especially at Gamescom. There was a very sort of strong anti-North American sentiment around pricing, specifically, right? The price of making games in North America is very, very high. And then also the adaptability to new technology and trying new things. It feels like North America right now is a bit behind the curve, and we see a lot of that activity happening. And I think to the Black Myth Wukong, I think that's a great example of like when we sort of lean into cultural norms of different areas of the world. I think there's a Black Myth Wukong that's hopefully in development in India, sort of celebrating their culture. And I think more of those things that we celebrate, different aspects, get more players sort of playing together. But there's a sort of this sense of feeling of like, hey, go away from North America, which as a Canadian living in America is, makes me scared.
Yeah, I get the sense that the gamers here are, I don't know, sick and tired of experiments, I guess, and so they seem to have said no to the metaverse, and they said no to blockchain, and I think they're in the process of saying no to AI, but that last one doesn't seem like the greatest position to me. So I don't know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, AI is a fascinating one because there's so many subcategories of it, and so I think to reject it completely, I think is a bit quick. And I think as an industry, we often like to reject change, or change takes longer because it's not built by us and we didn't build it here first. And so AI is fascinating because there is a step change. I think, of course, I'm worried about the dopamine reprogramming that can happen with AI as it knows all the inputs. And I see this with TikTok reprogramming my kids' brains and mine as well. Unfortunately, I'm not only a fan, but a user. But how do we monitor that? How do we watch the impact of it? And how do we also continue to celebrate handcrafted experiences? We can all go to McDonald's right now, but we prefer going home to eat where we're making the food ourselves, right? And I think that's the same allegory with video games, is that we're going to prefer handcrafted experiences, even though these tools are allowing us to do things faster.
Right now, in talking to the developers at Gamescom especially, I was surprised at how many folks are using AI as an efficiency tool and a cost-cutting tool. So it's not really, I mean, there were a few where it's like, hey, I've got an AI platform, and you give it a couple of instructions that can crank out a very simple video game. Are you interested? Not so much.
Yeah, press button, make game, that's not.
Right, and I agree with you. I don't know how much legs, and everybody's going to have that pretty soon. But the folks that are trying to rewire AI into the production, the creative process, the analytical process afterwards, that's where I think right now there's a lot of activity, and somewhere in the future they're going to figure out how to wire that into games, I think, in a meaningful way, but that's not now. So it's going to be efficiency first, and then I think game features, growth, customization maybe down the road. So I heard a lot more positivity when, behavior and some of the other folks that are spending time on this, than I heard negativity on AI.
Yeah, the picks and shovels part of it definitely is popular, utilizing it. I think it goes back to the ethics problem, is that if people are being declarative saying that I will not play a game with AI, you're like, what if the AI helped them do a procedure within the pipeline that made it a little bit more efficient? Does that count? Like, where do we end? Where does it end and start? I think that's a really fascinating part of the industry.
Yeah, we did have one conversation where it was like, okay, AI is going to be adaptive in real time to the game, but it's going to be governed by AI and analyzed by another. So it'll be interesting to see how they figure it out. But I do think there are issues there. Yeah.
So we're not going to get too far into the discussion on AI, I'm afraid. We're just about wrapping up here. I do think that one of the most interesting things to me in the travels I just did, I think, was, everybody knew that free-to-play had a very sort of precarious business model where 98% of the players never bought anything. I think especially, say, in a Zynga game, right? But the 2% that spent money were the ones that made the whole thing a success. And by going to the Middle East, I feel like the 2% are there. They're a young crowd. They play a lot of games. They play so many games that they're good at esports. I mean, esports is sort of being reborn in the Middle East now. I think that, I think Game of War made $4 billion in revenue, and the #1 clan that they had was run by someone in Saudi Arabia, and the #2 clan that they had was run by someone in Dubai. And that just sort of tells you, like, who's spending the money and where they are. And I think that's just an example of where the modern game business is. And it's always changing, but that particular example, I think, is just telling. So anyway, I think we've run out of time for this panel. I don't know if anybody has a last word to throw in. Go ahead.
Maybe Ed and I are like kind of smiling at each other here, and going back, there have been cycles in this industry forever. PC, it was technology, 3D accelerator technology, then console cycles, which are pretty predictable, and the same kind of things happen. You mature, you get a lot of people in it, it gets a little stale, a lot of sequels, people lose their job, amazing amount of creative juices start flowing there, then you get some kind of catalyst that kind of refocuses it, new experiences, new brands, and you take off again. And so as I look at this, it's like I don't understand it as much as those simpler models we had back then, but it's the same pattern, so it's rhyming with history, as they say. So as I told you guys this morning when we were talking about this, I don't think a lot of people have made very much money betting against the game industry in the last 30 years. So I see whether it's AI or some other technology is going to light a fire with the creative people that have gotten together with partners to do interesting things, and we'll be back into growth, but it could be another 6, 12 months before that flushes through and we see what that's going to be that lifts the sales again. But I'm bullish long term, certainly.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much.